Connie, and I'm a travel nurse. And I'm creating this blog so that if you're curious about travel nursing or interested in becoming a travel nurse yourself, you can learn how to avoid some of the mistakes and pitfalls. And also so that you become better educated so you can see if it's the right decision for you. I wouldn't discourage anybody away from travel nursing. I love it, but I also feel like if you're going to call an agency and talk to a recruiter, you may not get the whole picture being a travel nurse because they want you to sign up with them and work with them, so they may not always tell you everything straight up. So I will tell you and probably focus on some of the more disadvantages of being a travel nurse, not to be negative, but just so for the sake of time, just because I want to be able to cover some of these things that are important. And I think with today's being 2018, there's been a lot of changes in travel nursing. And so people that traveled in the past probably are not going to have the same experience if they travel now. It's very, very different. My experience is that I've been traveling for 14 years. I've seen a lot of changes. I have worked at 41 different hospitals, and out of the 41 contracts that I've had, 33 have been extensions, and I have been working on this for the 14 years that I've been a nurse. I think I know a little bit about travel nursing. So I'd like to talk to you today about what travel nurses do and how do they get to where they are. I get asked a lot when I go to work, especially a new place, and maybe they're not that familiar with travelers, so they like to ask me a lot of questions. And I can't really answer the questions like I'd like to because, you know, we're at work and we're taking care of patients, and I can't really take time out of my day taking care of a patient to talk about this. So I'm creating this blog so I can refer people to. But I get asked a lot about, especially like from student nurses who just think this is the most glamorous thing ever, and how when they graduate they're just going to start traveling. And you know, that may be a little unrealistic, and maybe this might set a few things straight for them as well, because you definitely need at least 1 year of nursing experience before you start traveling, maybe even longer. If you really want to be safe. So to tell you, a lot of nurses, when they start traveling, they pick California because California has a lot of travel opportunities throughout. It's a great place. It's a great state. The thing about California is it's not part of any multi-state compact agreement, meaning that there are several states that are part of an agreement, and if you live in one of these states, you can work as a nurse in another state without getting a license. You can just use the reciprocity. But California is not part of any of that, so if you do want to work in California, you have to apply for a nursing license, and that can take 3 to 6, well, it can probably take up to 9 months actually, so you might want to keep that in mind. When you first decide that you want to be a travel nurse, you need to have a recruiter that you can work with, somebody that you're comfortable with, that you feel gets back to you in a timely manner, somebody maybe you can relate to, maybe have some interest together, or, you know, just something. You're going to be talking to this person a lot. They're your lifeline between where you are now and where you want to be. They're going to help you get to where you want to be. You need to be comfortable with them. They need to return your emails, return your texts and calls in a timely manner. If they don't, there's plenty of other recruiters out there that will. I feel like when you start traveling and you've decided where you want to go, and that is key, you need to pick a place. Nobody's going to send you anywhere. You're going to get to decide where you want to go. Once you do that, you fill out a skills checklist with the agency. They match your skills up with a job that you're qualified for. Please do not exaggerate on the skills checklist. You will be probably found out about this. If you've never seen an art line in your life, don't check that you're proficient and experienced with an art line. That may come back to haunt you one day. Just be honest with your skills. It may not mean that you won't get the job, but it may mean that you're putting patients' safety ahead, and you're being honest, and that's what's very important. When you fill out your skills checklist and all your paperwork is in order, the recruiter will submit you for the job that you want. Usually they have some basic details about the job. They know, how much the pay is, and they know what the shift is, and certain things like that they know. But when you have your interview with the manager or an assistant manager, you want to kind of verify that those things are correct, because sometimes things can get turned around. Which brings me to the interview. When you have an interview with a person at the facility, whether they be the manager or a charge nurse or whoever is having that authority to interview you, you need to present yourself very enthusiastic. You have to have inflection and tone in your voice that you're interested in the job. And you kind of you're missing that face-to-face thing that usually goes on in an interview, so you have to replace it. You have to show that you're interested through the phone. And if not, then you may not be picked for the job. You got to remember that managers are busy, and they will usually only spend a few minutes on an interview, so they will usually tell you the important things about the job first, and then when you after they're done with that, then you can ask them questions and verify the shift and verify if you want time off during the assignment and so on. And then you have to get that written in your contract. So basically, if you do get the job and you're offered it, then what you want to do is then you're going to get mounds of paperwork back from your recruiter. Now, I will step back and say that if you never get called on a job, the market right now is really saturated with travelers. There's a lot of travelers for one job that apply. So you may be at the bottom of the list there with the paperwork, and let's face it, managers are busy. They may only take the first few profiles off and call those and be satisfied with them, and you know, just because you don't get called doesn't mean that you weren't qualified for the job. You just have to submit to as many as you want to be able to get picked. So let's say that you've got the job and you're all set up to go. You're satisfied with your contract. Everything's in there that you have agreed upon. Make sure everything's in your contract that you've agreed upon. Then you need to look for housing. Housing can be a challenge. If you've never done this before, it can be daunting. You will need to take the stipend that they give you, which are the per diems. That means that the agency is giving you money to find a place to live. And it's supposed to be governed by the IRS and supposed to be by region. And the IRS has the max that they will allow. And the agencies will sometimes go way under that and give you that. And you kind of that's where you can negotiate. Because back in the old days, when I first started traveling in 2004, nurse travelers were really treated like royalty. We were given a plane ticket. We had a car waiting for us at the airport. We had to swing by the leasing office at the one-bedroom, get a one-bedroom apartment. And then when we went to our one-bedroom apartment, it was fully furnished. It had everything. Those were the days. It was good. These days, the stipend that you get will barely pay for a one-bedroom apartment, and in many cases it won't pay for a one-bedroom apartment. A lot of travel nurses either live with relatives or find rooms to rent, and make arrangements for housing. You might not always get everything you want with housing, but you can kind of negotiate too with your recruiter and try to get more money if you find that housing is too much of a challenge for you. Sometimes you can get more than you think, or that was originally said. With that being said, when you do take these monies as the stipends, you must have a tax home. Now, a tax home, in a nutshell, is basically your home that you pay rent, or you have a mortgage, you vote, you go to church, you have a bank account, things like that, where you live. And then you collect the stipend to use when you're away from this tax home, when you're actually working on a job. If you don't have a tax home, legally you're not able to collect stipends. And you will make a very low hourly rate that will probably not be worth traveling. So I would advise you, if you don't have a home or pay rent, you really need to look into that before you travel. Now, when you do start looking for housing and you find a place, remember, you've got all the risk. The agencies are no longer at risk for anything anymore. You're signing your own lease. You're setting up your utilities. If you want cable or internet or anything like that, you're going to pay for it. And with each time that you do this, usually there's credit check involved, so you're going to get your credit checked quite often. And deposits or no deposits, whatever it is, you're going to have to put that forward. And you know, it's not a deal breaker for a lot of people, but I'm just putting it out there. That's what happens. You're taking a huge risk. You've got to find an apartment complex. If you want a one-bedroom apartment, you got to find an apartment complex that will rent you an apartment for 3 months. That can be challenging. If you have a pet, that's going to be even more challenging to find a 3-month lease with a pet. I travel with a pet. I wouldn't have it any other way, but I'm here to tell you it's rather challenging to find that. So keep in mind that financially you're going to be on record as having the responsibility to pay these bills. And you know, you may not have even set foot inside the facility yet. Now that brings me to another point that I really hate to talk about, because it's a very sad thing when travelers get canceled. Now, if say you live in Florida and you've been accepted, your job, you know, the job was offered to you and you accepted the job in California, and you're going to take 4 days to drive out there. Day 3 comes, you're almost there, and your recruiter calls, because by then the hospital, they're not talking to you anymore. You now deal with the recruiter, and the recruiter tells you, Connie, I'm really sorry, but the facility is not using any travelers. They've decided that, you know, they're going to use half of the travelers or whatever, but you know, because of census or whatever they tell you, you're out of a job. It happens. I do not know statistics, but I do know that it's happening a lot, and it's happening more frequently than it used to. Very unfortunate thing. Now, in this case, you haven't even set foot inside the facility, so unless you've put something on social media that the facility saw and read and disapproved of, you know, it's probably not your fault. I mean, you could put 2 and 2 together on that one, but it's probably not your fault. You could be canceled for any reason. And unfortunately, they retain that right to cancel. It's not always, it's not really a two-way street with that, because you really can't cancel, but they can. You could also be at the facility for a month or so and be canceled. And in that case, they don't have to come up with a real reason. Maybe it's they feel like you're not really a good fit with them, or whatever. They could come up with anything. But you'll be unfortunately out of all of what you've paid for your rent and everything, because the recruiter, they're not gonna, they will help you, however, find another job. And that's always good, especially if they know that it wasn't your fault. Now, if you have a problem when you're on travel assignment, you got to remember that you're there to fill holes, and you're there to help the facility. So you need to be flexible. You need to be adaptable. But if you feel that the facility is putting you in an unsafe situation with patient care, don't just quit the assignment and then tell your recruiter, oh, I felt my license was at risk. Because basically, nobody can really help you at that point. If you are on an assignment and you do feel as though you're jeopardizing patient safety, the first thing you need to do is evaluate yourself. Think, okay, is this really a patient safety issue, or am I just feeling out of my comfort zone? Because you got to remember, as a traveler, you might have to step out of that comfort zone once in a while. That's part of being a traveler, doing things you haven't done, learning from other people, and you don't get a lot of time sometimes to really observe as much as you want, so you might have to take that leap. I mean, you do have to step out of your comfort zone. So if you're feeling like it's that, then sometimes you just have to carry on. But if it is a true safety of a patient, then what you need to do is you need to go to the charge nurse, and you need to let them know that this is, what your feeling is. Present it in not a confrontational manner, but just like let them know how you feel. A lot of times, it can be resolved really easily. Maybe, the charge nurse wasn't aware that the situation has happened and that they can reassign you or something. A lot of times. But if it's not resolved and you feel like it should go further, then go up the chain of command. Basically, what I'm saying is don't just quit the assignment, because a lot of times you will be banned from working. I mean, you'll be canceled, and you will be banned from that facility and any other network facilities within that organization. And the agency may not want to work with you. So it's probably not a good idea to just quit an assignment. I mean, plus you're already going to be out all the fees of that you've paid for the apartment and everything like that. So it's just not a good idea to do that. But overall, traveling is great. I've had some really great experiences. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I've learned new hobbies. I've grown as a person. I've grown as a nurse. I love to take photographs, and I had started doing that back in 2004 just to send home some pictures to family and friends who had never seen what I was able to see, and then it just kind of grew from there, and now I'm into photography and editing and things. So, I mean, you never know what things are going to lead to. So I think that being a travel nurse is great. I think that you have to have sort of the right kind of personality for it, to be flexible and adaptable, and sometimes you go in with a smile on your face, even though you may not be feeling like smiling, because you don't always have the safety of being a staff nurse. I mean, a facility will cancel a traveler on a dime. I mean, it's unfortunate, but they will, just because they're not that invested in you, and maybe they don't want to give you more chances than what they deem necessary. Sometimes, maybe even on the first patient complaint or thing that they may see, you may not be able to work there anymore. So you want to be, you want to do the very best you can and present the best attitude that you can. And on your days off, you really want to enjoy and just truly get the most out of your traveling career. Thank you for listening.